Right. I am joined with Dr. Marty Klein, whose course, Intimacy Skills, Teaching Clients How to Communicate, Manage Conflict, and Keep Agreements, is both coming up and we've done it in the past. It's an incredible class that was hugely successful and well received last time. So tell us a little bit about what we're going to learn in this class.
Oh, I'm so excited to be doing this. You're right. It was so successful last year. I wasn't in the least bit surprised that you asked me to do it again. So, what we're going to do is we're going to examine the architecture of intimacy. Everybody says they want more intimacy, right? But what does that actually mean? And just like a building has an architecture to it, there's a plumbing system, there's an electrical system, and all of that. Um, Intimacy has its own architecture. Intimacy involves how people negotiate conflict, how people do or don't make agreements or keep agreements, how people make sure that they're understood, how people make sure that they understand the other person. So there's a whole architecture to intimacy, and that's what we're going to talk about. And then what we're going to talk about is, well, how do you teach that? So one way that we teach that, of course, is we explain concepts, we teach ideas, we ask people uh, to do things in session. One of the things that I'm going to be doing in this course is I'm going to be talking about how do you use what's going on in the session as part of teaching? How do we model intimacy and how do we challenge people's non-intimate behaviors? For example, sometimes I'm working with a couple and one person will say something and the other person will interrupt. Some person will say, we had dinner at Joe's Cafe at 7 o'clock. And the other person will say, actually, honey, it was 10 minutes after 7. Now, let's say that that person is accurate. It really was 10 minutes after 7. But why do we need that detail? Why do we need that correction? That's an anti-intimate behavior, isn't it? First, the interruption. And second of all, the assertion that that fact is important. So I'm going to talk about how do you notice what's going on in session, the eye rolling or the people deflecting, people refusing to answer a question, but not admitting that they're refusing to answer a question. We'll talk about what do you do in the session so that you can point people to, there's an interruption of potential intimacy. I wonder why you did that.
I love that because I see that happen all the time, both in my personal and professional life. You want to call it out when it's happening personally, but you sometimes just, take a back seat. You're like, I know what's going on there. So tell me, like, what is one thing that somebody's going to take away from this class? Can you give me one, like, thing that people can look forward to and use tomorrow?
Sure, sure. One of the things that we're going to talk about is I like to focus on people's lived experience. We're always asking people, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? And people speculate. People say, well, the reason I did that, or people will start talking about their childhood. Well, I come from a family where there was a lot of arguing or whatever. I don't want people to speculate. I want people to report. What were you feeling at that exact moment? What was your intention at that exact moment? And sometimes what people reveal is, well, I wanted the other person to feel bad, right? Or I didn't want to feel like they could push me around. Or people will say things like, I was feeling, I was feeling really hurt. So I lost my temper. Well, hold it, hold it, hold it. You were feeling hurt, but you lost your temper. Now there's a decision there. There's a decision that we want to look at because the ways in which people make decisions, that is central to how the kind of quality of life that people have. So what our students can take away from this webinar the very next day is uh, helping people focus on what is their lived experience rather than simply asking why questions that invite people to speculate in ways that aren't really helpful.
I would imagine some of that is not always even conscious, right? And they don't sometimes know why they're doing it, whether it's, to make
Absolutely.
somebody feel stupid or to exert their own power and I'm always right. Um, and so I see that happen a lot. So I'm really excited about this class. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, one of the things that we're going to talk about is the importance of agreements in relationships. So if you say, if you say, let's have lunch and I'll meet you at noon, and I say, okay, noon, what you might mean by noon is 12 o'clock. What I might mean by noon is sometime between 12 o'clock and 12:30. And when I show up at 12:25 and you're already kind of peeved, and I feel like, well, here I am, let's have a good time, and you're sort of crabby about it. Um, well, we actually didn't have an agreement. We thought we had an agreement, but we didn't really have an agreement. So I'm going to be teaching our students how you teach patients, clients, to make really clear agreements and to know if the agreements are clear. And when you don't get what you want, if we hear all the time, we talk about nagging, right? We hear all the time. And then I come home from a day of golf, and then my wife nags me because I dropped my dirty socks on the kitchen floor, and it's not that big a deal. And why does she have to make such a big deal about that? And I say, well, what's the agreement here? Do you two have an agreement about what you're going to do with your dirty socks or not? So is she trying to enforce an agreement that does not exist, or has he broken an agreement? And those are two completely different situations. So that's another thing that we're going to talk about.
I'm excited. And not just the agreement, but understanding like not only are we on the same page, but what is most important to you, right? Like at some point, are the socks on the floor the most important thing? And if so, we need to understand that too.
That's a great point. And it's not the socks on the floor. It's the socks on the floor that I've asked you to not do that 100 times already.
Yeah.
It's the 100 times that I've asked you, and I still don't get what I want. That's the big deal. But if the other person, it's only a lousy pair of socks, the planet is melting and you're concerned about dirty socks on the floor. What's wrong with you? And those people are not going to come to any sort of a consensus about this without our help.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Marty. I'm very much looking forward to the class and seeing you as always.